They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
Zombies have always been political within American culture. This is absolutely no secret, but the origin of the zombie traces back to Haitian voodoo, where the spectre of zombification served as a harrowing deterrent against suicide. After the Haitian Revolution, which saw slaves overcome their oppressors, the imperialist West feared their success and wielded Haitian voodoo as a weapon to portray the revolutionaries as savages. The first ever zombie movie, White Zombie, which popularized the idea of zombies in mainstream culture, featured actual zombies linked to Haitian voodoo, which clearly was reflective of America's fear of the other. From there, zombies became more prevalent in American culture, and in the decades following, White Zombies seemed to shift away from the fear of the other and voodoo and became more reflective of America's fear of the Cold War and the bomb. And yet, zombie movies were still largely considered childlike across popular culture. I mean, just look at Roger Ebert's review of Night of the Living Dead, where he states, "There were maybe 24 people in the audience who were over 16 years old. The rest were kids, the kind you'd expect at a Saturday afternoon kiddie matinee. This was in a typical neighborhood theater, and the kids started filing in 15 minutes early to get good seats up front." Night of the Living Dead changed everything in horror and the zombie genre. By the time he had finished the film, Ebert said, "The kids in the audience were stunned. There was almost complete silence. The movie had stopped being delightfully scary about halfway through and had become unexpectedly terrifying. There was a little girl across the aisle from me, maybe 9 years old, who was sitting very still in her seat and crying." Zombie movies went from being films parents dropped their kids off to watch and became a real reflection of nightmares. Romero's tight budget meant the zombies, or ghouls as they're called in the films, are not, bar in a few cases, the decaying, almost melting figures we see in popular zombie media today, and are instead, at first glance, still very human. His cinema verite style keeps the film raw, and the Dutch angled close-ups mirror the terror on the faces of the 1968 American audiences as they watch these zombies on screen literally devour human flesh, as the film's atmosphere keeps growing more claustrophobic as our survivors become increasingly desperate and start to get killed off one by one. Even the film's hero gets killed off at the end with no remorse. I think it's important to mention that any social or political implications from the film have been deemed unintentional by George Romero. He set out to make a film about how people react to a situation of that magnitude unfolding, but he recognizes these implications exist and understand why people read his film the way they do. I mean, just look at the newspaper-like images at the end of the film after our main protagonist has been shot that mirror those of a lynching. And the film holds a mirror to the American nuclear family and forces audiences to watch as the facade of it cracks. The imagery within the film is not something that can be ignored, especially as the 1960s were a heavy decade for violence, especially the year of the film's release in 1968, with the height of the Vietnam War and the assassinations of political figures Martin Luther King and Kennedy. It was an intense time of political and social unrest, with numerous protests. Those brainless hordes of zombies echo the average citizen's fear of conforming to the standard, and to those scummy corporations and the elite class, it resonates with the fear of losing control and what was established, and reflected the nightmare of communist takeover. Horror has often resonated as a genre because it can serve as a stark reflection to the public's anxieties, and there aren't many films that utilize this as much as Night of the Living Dead. We have an interesting relationship with the idea of the end of the world. We're fascinated by it. People even dedicate a significant amount of time and money preparing for it. For some, what should be a point of existential fear is actually almost weirdly a desire to prove that they could survive, even if they know they most likely would not. However, there seems to have been a slight and steady decline in the popularity of the zombie genre in the past few years, with the exception of probably The Last of Us. And I think that's the result of the pandemic, where the world just kind of stopped. And we got a slight taste of that isolating feeling of the end of the world, the chaos and the unknowing of it. We got a glimpse of what the characters in Night of the Living Dead and our favourite zombie media feel. We had to prepare to be in our homes, boarded up for months. Watching zombie movies and being entertained by the end of the world was once distant, and now it's almost a true horror that people don't want to sit by and watch. I guess you could say it's America's nightmare.